I recently posted a YouTube review of the new TTArtisan 100mm f2.8, a lens introduced in August 2023. It's a very interesting lens, sold in an M42 mount with a triplet optical design, a reimagining of the classic and much sought-after vintage triplet lenses, most notably the Meyer-Optik Gorlitz Trioplan of the same length and speed. The TTArtisan lens, like the Trioplan, produces distinctive bubble bokeh, and not just bubbles, but also beautiful blur wide open and stop down, as I hope I demonstrated in my review. I'm very grateful for all the comments you posted under the review, including some points that I'll be addressing in this video. When I tested the TTArtisan lens, my main aim was to determine whether the new lens can give you the kind of images you can see online from the old Trioplan, and I believe it can. The old Trioplans are expensive lenses to buy these days, so you had to commend TTArtisan's initiative in making such a good value alternative. Now, a number of people have said that they'd like to see a more direct comparison between the TTArtisan and the Trioplan, hence this video. I went out and bought a Trioplan with an exact mount, the same type as the M42 mount lens. It has what I think is a very attractive polished metal silver body, with 15 aperture blades, and it's a little lighter than the TTArtisan. The TTArtisan has a minimum focus distance of 0.9 meters versus 1 meter for the Trioplan. It doesn't sound a lot, but it does make a visible difference, as you can see from these two images, and you'll notice this on other pairs of images. Before showing you the image comparisons, a quick look at the physical design of the Trioplan, because it has some surprises. Firstly, you may think the front of the lens is integral to the lens body. You seldom see the lens pictured without it, but actually it's a screw-on lens hood. The lens definitely benefits from using a hood, as does the TTArtisan, to help avoid lower contrast images. Secondly, when you unscrew the back of the lens, you can see that the part of the lens with the glass is quite small. I've wondered in the past why the Trioplan is so long, and why there's a significant size difference between the Trioplan and, for example, the much smaller Meyer-Optik Gorlitz Trioplan. Well, without the back, the Trioplan lens is not so different in size. Thirdly, unlike the TTArtisan, the Trioplan has a preset mechanism. You need to pull this ring forward to set the preset setting. There's a tiny dot on the ring to show you where this setting is. These old lenses can suffer from a variety of condition problems, some of them listed here on the screen. Fortunately, my Trioplan doesn't have fungus. The grease seems okay, and the oil on the blades is there, but not a major issue. But the lens glass definitely has a few scratches, and it does have dust inside. I'm not so concerned about the scratches, but dust is an issue, as dust particles show up in the images. In particular, they appear in the bubble bokeh this lens is so famous for, and you can see it here, with the dust looking a little like craters on the moon. If you're brave, you can take the lens apart and try to clean the glass, or get a specialist to do this for you. But some problems, including problems with cemented groups, may be impossible to deal with. So buying an expensive old Trioplan is undoubtedly a risk, and the better condition lenses tend to be even more expensive. There's one in excellent condition on sale online right now for $850 for instance. Good luck with that. A big advantage of buying the new TTArtisan is you won't have these kinds of problems, and it's considerably less expensive, even compared to old Trioplan copies in poor condition. This brings us on to the key question: how does the TTArtisan's performance compare optically with the Trioplan? I'm going to show you a series of images side by side from the two lenses, taken at the same time on different cameras, and I'll comment on them as appropriate, or I'll be silent with no music when I think the photos are self-explanatory. These are all crop sensor photos, the Trioplan on a crop sensor camera, and the TTArtisan on a full frame camera, but on a crop setting, so the images are directly comparable. I'm using 1.5 crop images in this video for various reasons, including the fact that I know a number of you are using crop sensor cameras. Both these lenses are full frame lenses, and the photos in my review of the TTArtisan were all full frame images. If you want to see full frame photos from my Trioplan, I'll be posting some on Flickr. The other point to make is you will see some slight differences in exposures that can impact the look of each image, even after some small processing adjustments. I found the TTArtisan really does give you the vintage lens experience with digital cameras, and sometimes you need to play around with the manual settings to get well exposed images. That's some background. Now let's get on with the comparative images, starting with one of the main reasons why people admire and want to buy these triplet design lenses. And it's all about the beautiful rendering of the soap bubble bokeh for still life photos or portraits. Other lenses can produce soap bubbles, but these 100mm triplets are especially good. Can you tell which is which? Actually, aside from the focus distance, the telltale signs are there when you zoom in, because you can see dust in the older lens. So from now on, the Trioplan will be on the left and the TTArtisans on the right. Taking a crop from these images, there are clear and obvious similarities between the rendering of the bubbles. Both lenses have produced large, juicy bubbles, and both lenses produce yellow lines around the bubbles, although the Trioplan's yellow lines are a bit more pronounced. And here are some more soap bubble bokeh comparisons. All of these are taken wide open. You'll see some more bubbles later when we look at the impact of stopping down. Overall, I think the results are remarkably similar. I had fun with this scene. It's the roof of a car covered in raindrops in bright sunlight. If you look deep into the bubbles on top of the car, the Trioplan produces some fascinating patterned effects. I've seen these patterns from a few other vintage lenses, and it's rather beautiful. The TTArtisan produces a similar cross effect in the center of the tiny bubbles, but without the intricate patterns. I don't think this makes a meaningful difference to the images produced by both lenses in a normal view, but it's quite interesting to look at under the microscope. It's wrong to focus exclusively on bubble bokeh images with these lenses. It's probably something I've been guilty of, because both lenses can produce lovely smooth blur in the right conditions. I have to say that in bright light with bright highlights, it can be hard to avoid capturing some bubbles, but that's true for all lenses wide open. And sometimes the background or foreground blur can have a textured look with bubbles in that texture. Nevertheless, it's entirely possible to take photos with no bokeh bubbles at all, not just using the lenses conventionally, but also using them with extension tubes. I found both lenses perform well on extension tubes, and it should be easy to pick up a simple, cheap set of M42 extension tubes. This exact-amount extension tube with the zebra design is definitely a thing of beauty, and it's a bit of a beast when it's extended. On to sharpness, and in my review I described the TTArtisan sharpness wide open as not razor sharp, but it's certainly sharp enough. For a formal sharpness comparison test, I put the lenses on the same camera with a digital viewfinder for magnifying the subject for accurate focusing. I'll zoom into the TTArtisan image first, and you can see there's a touch of glow or ghosting around the white in-focus letters. The good news is that the letters themselves are nice and sharp, and in many images, these effects really don't create a big problem. The Trioplan's rendering of the letters on this test shot wide open is also good zooming in. One other comparison, handheld outside. I'll crop these images to the fly so you can see how the lenses perform. Considering also the shots I posted earlier with extension tubes, I'd say both these lenses are nice and sharp wide open, but with some glow. And now on to how the lenses perform stop down. In my review of the TTArtisan, I found the lens was impressively sharp, but in terms of rendering, it struggles occasionally in very high contrast situations. It actually performs like a vintage lens in this regard, and you have to pay careful attention to the exposure settings. I was interested to find out how the Trioplan performs stop down, and I have a story to tell about this. Last year I tried another old Meyer-Optik Gorlitz lens, the Primatar 135 f3.5. It's a lens that also produces excellent soap bubble bokeh at or around its minimum focus distance. However, the Primatar is not a strong performer stop-down at longer distances, as say a walk-around or landscape lens, and I ended up describing it as one of the best-worst lenses I've tried. Great for close-up shots wide open, much less good stop-down further away. Would I be similarly disappointed with the Trioplan stop-down at longer distances? Well, I'm happy to report that the Trioplan performs much better stop-down, and you're not going to notice a big difference between it and the TTArtisan, apart from the colours, which I'll get onto in a moment. There's another notable aspect to stopping down with these lenses, and it's to do with the aperture blades. You can stop the lenses down quite a lot and still retain the rounded shapes of the out of focus highlights. I demonstrated this in my review of the TTArtisan. And here, with the Trioplan, bokeh bubbles also retain their smooth, round shape very well as you stop down, just like the new lens. The advantage of this, of course, is that you can stop down to increase sharpness and depth of field while retaining a good look to the bubbles, albeit the bubbles would be smaller. It's only after around f5.6 that the blades really start to show in images from both lenses, but even so it's hardly the stark kind of geometric shape you have with lesser bladed designs. One noticeable thing from these crops is that the TTArtisan's bubbles are smoother at f8 thanks to its more curved aperture blades, and that's an advantage of the new lens over the old one. My final set of comparisons involves the colours produced by both lenses. An observation made by a Trioplan owner Milan about my TTArtisan images involved the colour casts of the TTArtisan versus the Trioplan. He thought that the TTArtisan colours seemed cleaner, i.e. they didn't have the rather brownish tint that his Trioplan has, and other vintage lenses can have, because of their glass and early coatings. Having looked at images from my Trioplan, I agree with this observation, and you can see why on these comparison shots. Even allowing for any exposure differences, the Trioplan definitely has a darker, browner tint to parts of these images. The same tinting is apparent in the clouds here, for example. I do think the colour differences are one of the defining differences between these two lenses, and the Trioplan produces what is perhaps best described as a more earthy tone. One consequence of the Trioplan's colour rendering is it seems to handle vivid reds and greens and blues a little better. It tends to tone down the colours, and this can also help contrasts within a colour block, such as this red flower. But I'm not criticising the TTArtisan. In practical terms, it's generally better to start with a nice clean image, as produced by the lens, and then play with the colours in post-processing, toning them down if you want a more earthy look. I mentioned in my review of the TTArtisan lens that if you want to see a more authentic vintage lens look to some of your images, you may want to do some post-processing and add a brownish tint to the image, and I showed one example of this. Not very subtle, but I hope you get the idea. So there are the comparisons. The TTArtisan lens designers have done an excellent job recreating the kind of results produced by the old Trioplan, which is a very desirable but expensive old lens. The TTArtisan's soap bubbles are superb, and the rest of the out-of-focus blur is lovely, and the minimum focusing distance is a little closer. The colours are bright and clear, clearer and less tinted than the Trioplan. I think many people would rather have good clean colours and then apply vintage-looking tints in post-processing than start with the tint straight out of camera. If you're pixel peeping, the innards of the very small bokeh bubbles are perhaps more intriguing from the Trioplan, but on the negative side, and this is a big negative, the accumulated dust inside old Trioplans can look pretty ugly inside large bokeh bubbles. And the edges of the TTArtisan's bubbles at f8, for example, are smoother than the Trioplan's edges. Finally, stop down. Both lenses perform well as portrait or walk-around lenses, albeit with a vintage look and feel. So they're my conclusions based on these comparisons. The TTArtisan is a very good alternative to splashing out on an old Trioplan, and you avoid all the risks of buying expensive old lenses. If you're interested in buying the TTArtisan, then I've included an affiliate link in the description below. And please comment below if you have any suggestions or feedback on the video. Until the next time, all the best.